Ghost is a band from Sweden, and they look very scary. They have lore, but when I listen to them, all I hear is Bon Jovi. It's very catchy dad rock. And their fans walk around wearing the Ghost t-shirts like they're kind of hardcore, but I'm like, you're just a goth Bon Jovi fan, and that's okay. And they're known for having like kind of satanic lyrics, but it feels like it's just all part of the gimmick, like very cynical Satanism. I much prefer Satanism that's from the heart. I should have known they weren't going to be that scary because they have a legible band logo. We all know that scary band logos look like this. Lorna Shore is a deathcore band that gets a lot of flack for being, I'm not sure exactly why, for being maybe too mainstream, or some people call it like pop deathcore, as if there could be such a thing. I think people thought they were trying too many new things, they were trying to be too fancy. I think people like their deathcore pretty dumb, like a Muir level dumb. How mainstream can it be for the vocals to sound as upsetting as they sound? Let's get this guy some throat coat tea. Sleep Token is a ghost style costume band with different lore. They're more Lovecraftian than Catholic. Their singer is named Vessel, and he's a vessel for an ancient god named Sleep. They seem to have pro wrestling level commitment to their storyline. They don't give interviews. I don't think they talk at shows. And their sound is more in line with their look. They're very heavy sometimes. Sometimes they're really poppy, and they're always like interspersed with like spaciness. They're kind of like Tool, where it's like some of these songs could be tightened up, like they're running a little long. Let me get this straight. There's like a quiet, horny part, and then there's a loud, angsty part, and that's pretty much every song. Yeah, but sometimes the horny part can be loud, and the angsty part can be quiet. Then also Vessel is the voice of an ancient god, so is this ancient god also very horny? I don't know. And he's talking about, you hit my phone so hard that it has to breathe through a tube in the ICU. How does the ancient god know about phones or ICUs? How does that make sense? Dude, I don't know. I'm 40. Knocked Loose is just an example of how haters will be on you regardless of what you do. Everyone kind of makes fun of them for sounding like SpongeBob, but I mean, good on him for having a unique voice and just going with it. If he had just sounded like everyone else, haters would be saying he just sounds like everyone else. I don't know how haters think. I like when a band does something divisive. He called out his band's name, and I think that's cool. He could have just said Blit. You just want him to say Blit. Polyphia is an instrumental rock band that features the work of Tim Henson, arguably one of the best guitarists of his generation. But their songs sound like hold music. Due to unusually high call volume, you may experience a greater hold time than usual. Please stay on the line and your call will be answered by the next available representative. Impressive hold music, but hold music just the same. Plotted to Prevail is a deathcore band that originated in Russia. They wear masks, but not like high quality masks, like Spirit Halloween masks. Like they were wanting to be intimidating, but they were on a budget. And unlike other mask bands, they only wear the masks some of the time, and everybody knows their identities. And do they even have lore? And on one hand, I'm like, that's cool, they don't take it so serious. But on the other hand, I'm like, what do you stand for, man? I like their music, though. They have guttural vocals, heavy breakdowns, blast beats, and guitar squealies. Guitar squealies are my favorite. I don't mind the band Limp Bizkit. Fred Durst is annoying, but he's annoying like a fox. It's all part of his overall marketing strategy. Nobody writes a song called Nookie on accident. I think they happened to be the biggest nu metal band at the time the genre started to jump the shark, so they caught some of the inevitable backlash. But what we all know about backlash cycles is that it'll come around and nu metal is cool again. Who would have guessed? Most importantly, Wes Borland can write riffs. It doesn't really matter how cool you are. When you hear that first part of break stuff where it's like doo-doo-doo, you're just like, ah! Deftones are a band from California. When they first came out, you could lump them in with Korn and Limp Bizkit. At some point, they realized, what do we do when the pants are no longer baggy, hats are no longer backward, and the tips are no longer frosted? So they made White Pony, one of the more ambitious metal records at the time, and it kind of transcended nu metal. All the albums afterwards have been really ambitious and experimental and cool, which has won them a legion of very devoted fans. If you're asking me, I just really like when Chino goes. Korn came on the scene. They were just this super interesting mashup of influences. If your mom came by your room and heard you playing Korn, she's like, what is this? And you were trying to explain it to her, you'd be like, well, it's these dreadlock guys, right? and the guitars are tuned really low, and the bass sounds all cool, just like click, click, click. And the singer, sometimes he's doing like nursery rhymes, and sometimes he's not even doing real words. He's just like, and then you'd be like, well, you know what else is cool? Sometimes he wears a kilt and plays the bagpipes. I know that Linkin Park is not strictly a nu metal band. They are the band that use the 4 nu metal elements the most effectively. The 4 nu metal elements are heavy guitars, angst, turntables, a hip-hop guy. You can't overuse any one element, or else you start to get annoying. Like too much angst, you're Stain. Too much turntables, you're Incubus. Too much hip-hop guy, you're Limp Bizkit. Linkin Park balanced all the elements, got the formula exactly right, and rightfully blew up. Does a song ever come on and you wonder, is this song by the band Tool? Well, first ask yourself, is it a really long song? Do you find yourself going like, is this 2 songs? This is starting to feel like 3 songs now. Is my Spotify device malfunctioning? The second thing is it creepy? Do I feel vaguely menaced? If it meets both of those criteria, you're probably listening to a Tool song. But seriously, I really like the band Tool. I just don't have the like religious fervor for Tool that a lot of Tool fans have. Tool fans can get kind of like evangelical. Like, have you heard the good word of Maynard James Keenan? I always thought of Chevelle as like the blue-collar Tool, but really the only similarities are the vocals like Pete Loeffler and Maynard. Otherwise, they couldn't be more different. Chevelle is not trying to do math. The songs are much shorter, more streamlined. The instrumentation is a little more workman-like. Their fans are a lot less nuts. Pete Loeffler's hair always bugged me. Like, what do you call that? You call that a quiff? What kind of hairstyle is that? Mudvayne is a metal band that came up in the nu metal era. They had a lot of progressive elements. They were very heavy, screaming vocals. I liked them best when they had the makeup and they were the most screamy. The farther away they got from that, the less I was interested. It just became harder and harder to distinguish them from other bands as they went along. That's a very cliche thing to say, and I like their earlier stuff better, but I think they know that because they're wearing the makeup again on this Victory Lap nostalgia tour. So the moral of the story is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and brr ding. Rage Against the Machine did the rap rock thing the best. They had the super angry political lyrics, weird guitar noises. They eventually imploded, and I think that's partially due to the mental gymnastics you have to do while espousing pretty leftist politics, but also making a ton of money working for a giant corporation. Bulls on Parade has one of the only acceptable uses of a wah pedal in music, as far as I'm concerned. The only other 2 are Enter Sandman and All Along the Watchtower. All other uses of a wah pedal are unacceptable. I will now read from a prepared statement. It has come to my attention that some members of the musical community have been offended by statements made by me regarding wah pedals. I would like to apologize for any hurt I've caused. Here are some corrections to the original list I gave previously. For Whom the Bell Tolls is obviously an acceptable wah pedal song. Eric Clapton's use of the wah is acceptable, but only for his time in Cream. He has subsequently lost his wah privileges. In addition to All Along the Watchtower, all Jimi Hendrix songs that use wah are now considered acceptable. The following artists have been granted carte blanche use of the wah pedal: Slash, Jerry Cantrell, Dimebag, Kirk Hammett, although he has received a written warning that he is on thin ice. I hope that you will all take my apology in good faith and allow the healing to begin. Also, it's ironic that one of the more popular brands of wah pedals is the Crybaby. A good summary of 311 is those first few seconds of Down, where it's like heavy riff, chill. The funniest thing about 311 to me is that they're from Nebraska. Like, who's from Nebraska? I just picture Tim, Chad, S.A., Nick, and Peanut sitting around telling their mom, hey, we're bored. And their mom being like, this is Nebraska, it's supposed to be boring, you're gonna have to make your own fun. And they're like, okay, well, we're gonna start a reggae-influenced rock hip-hop band. And their moms were just like, be home before the streetlights come on. It's fun music. Nobody can deny that it's fun music. Nebraska. Red Hot Chili Peppers are a funk rock band, which basically means you get a lot of slap of the bass. Sometimes a little too much, if I'm honest. What I think is interesting about the Chili Peppers is the mythos of John Frusciante. He kind of joined the band at a crucial point, and they seem to excel when he's in the band and kind of struggle when he's not. Everybody makes fun of Anthony Kiedis' lyrics. I don't know. Writing lyrics is hard. What I like to envision happen is the rest of the band was working hard and pulling their weight, and he kept showing up to practice with no lyrics written. And they're like, all right, you need to show up to next practice with some lyrics written or you're fired. And the next practice rolled around and he still hadn't written. And so they're like, all right, what's up? And he's like, and they're like, fine. Then they made a whole career out of it. So here's the deal with Weezer. They made this album, the Blue Album, which everybody liked. Then they made Pinkerton, which nobody liked. Then they made the Green Album, and when people heard that, they were like, yikes, maybe Pinkerton is not so bad. Then they tried to go back and say that they all loved Pinkerton all along, and that Pinkerton was some kind of masterpiece. But it was too late. The damage was already done, and nobody ever got excited about a Weezer album like ever again, ever. This is an interesting theory, but I don't think it holds that much water. Rivers, he seems like kind of an egotistical guy. Like, I don't think he's taking a lot of creative suggestions from like a bass player. No offense to bass players, but come on. Kitty is a metal band from Canada, and you know I have a soft spot for Canadians. They're an all-female band, which shouldn't be a big deal, but in the 90s it was kind of novel. My mind was blown. I was like, they're girls, but they rock so hard, because I was just full of sexism and toxic masculinity. It was the 90s. They have like some really beautiful parts, nice cleans, and then just heavy parts. The band has siblings, which I love. Never could figure out the lyrics in that one part. It was like, awesome though. Canada, man. Static X is a metal band that will always be inextricably linked to the singer's hair, and he unfortunately passed away a few years ago. But his bandmates reunited, and they replaced him with this guy wearing a mask. And I think they meant to do it as a way to not disrespect him. A lot of people are speculating on who the guy really is. What I think is more likely is they created him out of like an evil spell, and it's a thing that came to life, and it needs like a certain amount of human blood, and they have to like sacrifice a goat. And anyway, I think Wisconsin Death Trip is a really good album. Describing the band Cake is like you went to a show and there's a guy there in a hat talking, and sometimes he's singing, but mostly he's just talking in a monotone. And then also sometimes a guy plays a trumpet, and you say to yourself, inexplicably and against all odds, this is awesome. It all works really well together somehow. The rest of the band obviously is really great. I can sing some of those riffs and bass lines from memory. They're just a cool, weird band, and we don't have enough cool, weird bands anymore, and that's a shame. With Dave Matthews Band, there's not a whole lot to say. He's been mocked relentlessly. There was the bus poop thing, which wasn't his fault. He's just impossibly cartoonishly lame. But dude still sells out stadiums, so he's doing something right. I think in these dark days, people just want a community of like-minded people, do and feel something positive. People want something to believe in. And if what people want to believe in is Dave Matthews Band, I say that's great. There are much worse things to believe in. Toadies are a one-hit wonder band from the 90s. The 90s were cool because weirdness was rewarded, and their one big song was super weird. It had cool guitar parts and it was super catchy, but the lyrics were just sinister. Listening to it felt like watching a horror movie. Like, do not go behind the boathouse with this guy. You're gonna die. I think they struggled with like record label stuff after that, and I get it. I had a tough time also navigating the early 2000s. At the end of the day, I still get a shiver up my spine whenever this song comes on. Bloodhound Gang was a lowbrow, guilty pleasure type of band. Like if an Adam Sandler movie was music. It was on all the time in my youth, and when I go back and revisit, it doesn't always hold up. Like there's this area where it's so bad it's good, or maybe it's just bad. They sampled Metallica and Frankie Goes to Hollywood in the same song. Is it clever, or is it dumb? Or is it like one masquerading as the other? And they were always flirting with that area. There's a genre of music called industrial, and just by the name I just assumed it was supposed to sound like machinery and like grinding metal. It has a lot of electronic drums and kind of sinister synths and grinding-ish guitars. Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails became kind of like poster boys for industrial. They brought it to the suburbs so people like me could buy it and hide it from their mom. The lyrics were always very dark and kind of angsty, and sometimes I'm like, maybe Trent Reznor should go to therapy, although maybe that would ruin it. Their logo though is so symmetrical. It's like the perfect band logo. Rammstein is a metal band from Germany. And when I was young, I was always looking for bands that would be kind of scary, like that would intimidate my parents. and my peers at school. But then when I found Rammstein, I was like, these guys are legit sinister. Like, it legit scared me. Part of it is I didn't understand German. Google Translate like hadn't been invented yet. And as I'm older now, I see a lot of it is just their imagery and kind of like a certain theatricality and just an overall brand. And what a brand they have. These live shows are just like a OSHA nightmare. How many workers' comp claims have they paid out on these shows? Amazing. Rob Zombie is a musician and film director. He started out in the alternative metal band White Zombie. To write a Rob Zombie song, you need the 3 key elements. You need to have gravelly, low-pitched vocals like, and then the second part is you need to have horror imagery. Then the third key ingredient, and this is crucial but overlooked, is you need cowboy hats. Personally, I prefer White Zombie. More human than human. That has a slide guitar part, and it was cool. And it was metal, and that is just insane to me. Oasis is the story of 2 brothers. The older one wrote really good songs, and the younger one had the most nasal voice in all the United Kingdom. They made 3 nearly perfect albums, but they were also known for beefing with people, most often each other. They would always talk trash to each other, but I always thought it was like pro wrestling, kayfabe, like, when I get you in the ring, brother, woo! Like, just stuff like that to get attention. But they haven't played a show since 2009. They're leaving millions on the table by not having a huge reunion tour. And that kind of spite seems like real and stuff you can only get from family. Nirvana was very important to me because they're the punk offshoot of grunge. A lot of the riffs and chords were not that technical. They were very learnable for someone who is starting out. It made becoming a musician seem achievable. The first riff I ever punked out on a Squire Strat is Come As You Are. And pretty soon I learned the chords to Smells Like Teen Spirit. And while the chords were learnable, to write songs that good, I think is just something that comes from an insane talent. What you need to know about Soundgarden is Kim had the riffs and Chris had the pipes. He's a 1 in a million singer. I put them in the classic rock denomination of grunge just because of maybe his singing style and some of the riffs. It's hard to overstate how big of a song Black Hole Sun was. Like, there was a couple weeks in 1994 where it felt like it was the only song. It was playing everywhere and on everything, and it felt like there had never been any other songs before and that there would never be any other songs ever again. It was huge. What really can you say about Pearl Jam that hasn't already been said? He mumbles. That's just kind of his thing. I don't know how he's gotten away with it all these years. Out of the different denominations of grunge, they're kind of the bluesy offshoot. There was a lot of guitar solos and stuff for it being grunge. And I find nowadays, out of those 4, Pearl Jam's the one that interests me the least anymore. That could just be that they're the ones still putting out stuff and I kind of gotten bored of it. Then again, nothing's gonna hit like 10 did when you were 14. Enunciating is for posers. Alice in Chains was the metal sect of the grunge movement. I could always count on an Alice in Chains song to be spooky and heavy, and even like the acoustic ones were kind of like ethereal. When Lane Staley and Jerry Cantrell harmonized, I still get chills. Jerry Cantrell was so cool, he used a talk box and like made it cool. Before him, people only knew a talk box from like Living on a Prayer and Peter Frampton. I know there's a new iteration of Alice in Chains. I just can't really bring myself to listen to it because I like the memories I had of Alice in Chains as they were. Lane Staley died when I was 20, and obviously I'm not 20 anymore, but it was important to me, and I want to keep it in my memory that way. Stone Temple Pilots are the version of grunge that is just basically grunge, not from Seattle, California in this case. When they first came out, people were really going after them for sounding too much like the other grunge bands. I remember reading a review way back in the day that called them poor man's Pearl Jam. That just seems mean. But I think they took all this and it was kind of like a chip on their shoulder and it made them really raise their game. On their later albums, they were really incorporating new stuff and they kind of like transcended grunge, which was a hard thing to do. His vocals went kind of from like up to like I haven't listened to any of the new stuff. Apparently that's a hang up I have. With Bush, grunge was blowing up in Seattle, and then somewhere in the United Kingdom they were like, what's all this grunge I'm hearing about across the pond? And then Gavin Rossdale leapt into the breach. And then they made their best British approximation of a grunge album. It's not bad, don't get me wrong. The band Creed is like someone tried to recreate Pearl Jam and failed miserably. You guys like Pearl Jam, right? Sure. What if we made a Pearl Jam where the singer enunciates a little bit? Like you can understand the lyrics better? What about if it was heavier and maybe the songs were more straightforward? I don't know. Okay, and then what about this? What if the lyrics have a lot of like Christian themes and Christian imagery? Ooh, no, definitely not. What if the singer is this guy? No. Metallica is kind of like Star Wars. Like everybody can pretty much agree that the first few were great. And then as they started to go on, the people making them started to become increasingly out of touch. People don't necessarily like the later ones. Some people do, and some contrarians really like them. And then there's these into forms, quote unquote, that are not necessarily good. I think the one consensus about Metallica is that Lars Ulrich seems like he's just the worst. Personally, I think James Hetfield's mullet was the source of their power, and when he cut it is when their albums started to get bad. Megadeth is just Dave Mustaine trying to get revenge on Metallica for kicking him out by creating a better band. He's been trying for 40 years, and I think he's succeeded. Megadeth definitely is the better band musically. Unfortunately, people are dumb, and Metallica has outsold Megadeth by a lot. And also, Dave Mustaine just comes across as the guy who's like obsessed with his ex and can't let it go. And Dave Mustaine seems like a cranky, mean-spirited old dude. And frankly, I'd rather hang out with Lars Ulrich. Slayer is the band that trod the straightest path through the thrash metal wilderness. Not perfectly, but they tried to stay true to their roots. And I think most people can agree that Slayer is pretty good. They always had the coolest riffs. They were always trying very hard to be as transgressive as possible. But now Tom Araya has a Dave Mustaine problem in that he became all conservative. That's not something you want to see from your metal heroes. Apparently that's a risk of fronting a super influential thrash band. You might turn into a cranky Fox News watching old guy. If you look at the big four, it's like one of these things is not like the other. It's Anthrax. They're from New York. They're one of the less interesting of the big four. Part of me thinks they just wanted an even number. What's the fourth band we could pick? Anthrax. There are some people who pick Anthrax as their favorite, and to that I say, really? Went through and ranked in all these categories. Riffs, songs, vocals. Anthrax did not win in any of these categories. If you think you're edgy, you say Slayer's your favorite. If you think you're really smart, you say Megadeth is your favorite. If you're just kind of basic, you're like Metallica is my favorite. If you think Anthrax is your favorite, then you're kind of just a contrarian. Pantera is a metal band made up of Phil, Rex, Zach, wait, no, that's wrong. It's made up of Phil, Rex, and brothers and musical virtuosos Dimebag, Daryl, and Vinnie Paul. They pioneered a genre of music called groove metal. In some metal, a lot of things are happening on the beat, like and then in groove metal, it's like syncopated. Some of the things are happening before or after the beat, like I'm not a music theorist. Go listen to I'm Broken. I still listen to Pantera on the regular, and the only thing that hasn't aged well for me is Phil Anselmo. Mostly just the things he does and says, and just him as a person, really. Even a lot of his macho tough guy lyrics, they just don't hit the same for me now that I'm not 14. Meshuggah is the band that invented djent. What's djent, you ask? It's a genre of music named after the sound of when they're just really giving it to the lower strings of the guitar, and it's that kind of chunky sound, and that's what they named it. Meshuggah also has polyrhythms, and I'd be lying if I said I know what that is, but I do know that a lot of their stuff is very complex. Look at these drums. Look at how fast, it's crazy. This guy's quads must be like... My only critique for Meshuggah would be, if you're going to invent a hugely influential genre, maybe put a little more thought into the name. GWAR is like a local metal band that got together on Craigslist and then proceeded to elevate their art with prop comedy and LARPing. It seems like, and I mean this in the best possible way, that the concept of GWAR could have come together with some middle school friends who were like, when we're on stage, we're going to have swords and armor, and we're going to have fake blood, and your stage name will be Ballsack. What I really appreciate about GWAR is they seem to be very tongue-in-cheek. Like, they're not taking themselves too seriously, and they and their fans seem to have a great time. GWAR also seems like a band where if you get it, you really get it. If you don't get it, then it's you and me both, man. Real Big Fish kind of exemplifies ska punk. It's literally ska and punk. Frankenstein stitched together, and you violently lurch between ska verses, like with upbeats, to like punk choruses, ska punk, and then you have horns that just kind of like goes straight into your spine. I'm not against ska or punk or the intermingling of ska or punk. I just like it when it's done a little more skillfully. There are bands who do it a little better. But again, really fun music. I enjoy it when I'm in a certain mood.
I never knew anything about Seether until I heard their singer was dating Amy Lee, and then I saw him and I was like, that guy? He must be charismatic or something. Anyway, Seether is really good, and Sean Morgan has one of the better voices in that genre. I kind of put them in the post-grunge rock guys category, like Hinder, Nickelback, but not like photograph Nickelback, like good Nickelback. And I don't mean that as an insult, and I'll tell you something. One time I went to a Radio Rock festival, and Nickelback was on the bill, and I thought they were pretty good. And I've never told that to another living soul.
Five Finger Death Punch is a band that you would guess is from Florida, but they're actually from Las Vegas. A lot of people don't like them, but if you strip away all the weirdness, the music itself is not so bad. I think one of the problems is some of the members have all the political views of your angry uncle posting on Facebook, and the singer seems like he's just legit a not good person, and he's very unprofessional, which is a shame because this dude looks like the most metal dude I've ever seen. Disturbed is a hard rock band from Chicago. I would put Disturbed in the therapy metal category. Trauma, mental illness, being misunderstood. What I find most interesting about Disturbed is would they have ever blown up the way they did, or would we still be talking about Disturbed today if not for the guttural squawk heard around the world? I think so. I think we'd still be talking about them. They have strong melodies, but they're just very unique. System of a Down is one of the more unique rock metal bands that blew up in the 2000s. I always liked how they could kind of turn on a dime, go from a very pretty melodic part to like a super fast, super heavy part. Likewise, the vocals could go kind of from cartoonish to like very powerful to like kind of operatic. To me personally, they felt more sincere about their political message and their anti-war sentiments than other bands. And I think Green Day and some others copied off of their paper a bit with great success. They haven't put out any new music in a while, which is a shame because no one can yell 1,000 syllables a second like Surge can. Alien Ant Farm always seemed to me like a new metal tragedy. They got big off their heavy cover of Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal, and that's pretty much what everybody knows them for. If you listen to their other albums, you know that they have so much more going for them. They have good songs, and why aren't more people talking about what a good rhythm section Mike Cosgrove and Ty Zamora were? But at live shows, Dryden talks about how that Michael Jackson song bought him a nice house and multiple fancy cars, so Alien Ant Farm is doing okay. They are moonwalking straight to the bank. In high school, I had a friend we all called Sport. He was a huge Slipknot fan, and we all made fun of Slipknot, saying they're not a good band because they're from Iowa, they're super gimmicky, and they just wear masks and jumpsuits. They have too many members. It's just like therapy metal. Oh, he just cries about his problems. But Spork knew what we didn't know. Slipknot was backing up their gimmick with good songs and musicianship. It only got better with time. They're still around, and they're as popular as they ever were. And actually, I lost touch with Spork, and I don't remember his real name, so I can't look him up. So if you're out there, Spork, hit me up. Mushroomhead, they're a new metal costume mask band from the Midwest. Only they claim to be the first one. Like, they came before Slipknot. Ooh, not good. If true, it's probably not true. Corey Taylor wouldn't do something like that. It's probably just more like parallel thought. Scary costumes with, aggressive music. Makes sense. It's not like rocket science. With the fandoms, it feels like you have to pick one or the other, like rival gangs. They seem kind of similar to me musically, and one is from Des Moines and one is from Cleveland, and neither of those places are that great, so I understand the angst. Nickelback is a band that had the audacity to become extremely successful while also being, yes, extremely corny. But I would ask, are they any more corny than, say, Hinder, Seether, Shinedown, etc., etc., etc.? For a long time, it was a lazy joke to kind of dunk on Nickelback, and also kind of a way to say, oh yeah, I also have good musical taste because I hate the band that everyone hates. But now we're paying the penalty because, well, we were saying Nickelback, the worst band ever. Imagine Dragons was like, hold my beer. I think we're at a point in music history where we're starting to see the redemption story of Nickelback. People are starting to reevaluate whether Nickelback really was that bad, and I'm here for it. One time I played Coheed and Cambria for a girl I was dating, and she said, I don't like this style of music with female vocals. And I said, she's probably not the one. The cool thing about Coheed is you can listen to all the full concept albums and the comic book and the space opera, or you can just jump in for the delectable pop nuggets and jump back out. It's up to you. Coheed fans are this funny Venn diagram of like emo, pop punk fans, classic rock, prog fans, Star Wars fans, and virgins. Or at least that was the case for me when I was super into Coheed. Slap at the bass is one way to think of Primus. A better way to think of Primus is just a band always kind of just doing something new. Everyone knows Les Claypool for his bass playing, but I think he needs more credit as like a lyricist. Each song is a story. Stories about meth heads and fishermen and meth heads, just him and Lair and whichever drummer, and it's amazing. Primus's superpower is that Les Claypool doesn't give a single flip what anybody thinks. There was a brief period in like 99 where he second guessed himself. It was still pretty good, so Les took a little break, did like 9,000 other musical projects, and came back stronger than ever, giving less of a flip than ever. I'm not 100% sure why he's so committed to the bowler hat, but whatever. Radiohead is a band, alternative, experimental, British. Listen, I know I'm supposed to care about Radiohead, but I can't make myself care about Radiohead. Like, I've listened to it, I've tried, like, today you're gonna get into Radiohead, but I don't get it. Like, they're expanding the horizons of what music can be. Probably. Does it interest me? Not really. This one is Tom York. I don't know who the rest of these people are. Fish are what we call a jam band, and that means they take a normal song and they stretch it out to about 10 times its normal length through what's known in music theory as a lot of noodling. I think that this makes every live show very immersive and kind of a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And I know it must take a lot of talent. I guess my question just is it really necessary? You were so preoccupied with whether you could stretch songs out to 10 times their natural length, you didn't stop to think if you should. But people are really into it, so they must be onto something. One thing I can say for sure is the Fish ice cream is amazing. Green Day is a band that came out of the punk scene in California. They took kind of like the angry, loud guitar formula of punk rock and perhaps made it more melodic and more poppy. They're kind of considered pop punk, although there's disagreement about that label. It's all just very fraught. Some people didn't think by having the melody and having it become so mainstream that Green Day could be punk, but Green Day was the first time that I had really heard punk rock on the radio in whatever form. They probably weren't the first to do it, did get the most success, and they took a lot of the hits for selling out and not being punk. Basically, Green Day walked so that Blink-182 could charge $500 a ticket. If you want to attack Green Day's punk rock cred, let's talk about how Trey Cool's real name is Frank Edwin Wright III. Offspring is such a cool band. Smash was such a good album. They kept putting out good albums, and maybe it's just me or other Offspring fans remember exactly where they were when they heard Pretty Fly for a White Guy for the first time. There are bad songs, and then that song is just egregious. And it spelled the end of me taking the Offspring serious. It's like they had made Citizen Kane up till then. All of a sudden, they make The Room. You are tearing me apart! And I thought maybe it'll get better, and then on the next album they put out Original Prankster, a retread of Pretty Fly for a White Guy with Adam Sandler references. Anyway, the Offspring are really good. I don't begrudge them their success. But like, Dexter Holland has like a PhD, right? He should know, don't make songs this bad. With Blink-182, it's kind of like Mark and Travis are the mom, and Tom is the dad. And a few years ago, they got divorced. Probably because Dad was really difficult to work with. Mom remarried a few years ago, and now we have a new stepdad named Matt. He's been here for years now, taking care of us, putting in work, yet we still all prefer Tom, even though he hasn't shown up for anything in years, because he's our real dad. I will admit that California and 9 are just okay. But if we're honest with ourselves, Neighborhoods and Dogs Eating Dogs were also just okay. I miss Tom so much. You can't tell me what to do, Matt. You're not my real dad. You're right. I'm not your real dad. Because you know where your real dad is? He's out there looking for aliens. Shut up. Don't talk about my dad that way. No, you need to hear this. When he missed your t-ball game and he kept calling and saying he was on his way but he never showed up, he was making a movie about little green men. No, he wasn't. He said something important came up for work. He's not here right now. But I am.
I'll always be here for you. I'm not going anywhere.
I'm just so happy. So you want to know about Fall Out Boy? Fall Out Boy was a really good emo pop punk band in the 2000s, and they put out these 4 albums that are all pretty good. Sometimes that kind of got overshadowed by like the whole image and their pretty boy bass player, so they kind of went away for a few years, and when they came back, the results were kind of mixed. And as a person who has bills to pay, I get why they were trying to switch things up and stay relevant, but on the whole, it's not my favorite. And part of that is because of the stylistic change, and the other part of it is because I'm old. My Chemical Romance was a pop-punk emo band from the 2000s, probably one of the better ones. They had very good songs, very talented musicians. It seemed like a lot of people who were into My Chemical Romance were young ladies who were into Gerard Way for his boyish good looks and the raspy singing voice of your aunt who smokes too much. It's weird to think about now, but around that time, emo was kind of like scary and unknown. People actually wrote articles about, is emo bad for the youth? But how can you be afraid of My Chemical Romance? They are adorable. Sum 41 is my favorite Canadian pop punk band from that 2000s pop punk boom. I love that they had all these influences. They're influenced by metal like Iron Maiden, and then they had hip hop like NWA. And they just seem like big music fans. I love the shreddy guitar. Whenever I talk about him, I'd call him Dave Baksh, because I was pretty sure I wasn't supposed to call him Brown Sound. When the guitar is just like meedly, 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 meedly. It's the best. It's funny that you could have a singer who looked like Bart Simpson back then and your band would just blow up. I love Canada. I was really into pop punk growing up, and even as a young person, I knew that pop punk wasn't that punk. And then even when I saw Simple Plan, I knew that they were even less punk than run-of-the-mill pop punk. Does that make sense? It seemed like they were just trying really hard. Like a lot of their lyrics seemed like they were written to be shouted through a slam door at your parents. Like, I'm sorry I can't be perfect, Dad. They're catchy though. I can't deny the catchiness. And they're Canadian, so I'll give them a pass. I was initially hesitant to listen to Reliant K because they had the scent of Christian music about them. I knew that that wasn't very cool to like as a young person. But then I bought Two Lefts Don't Make a Right or something, and it's just hooky pop music. Like some of the hookiest pop punk you will find. I liked that they weren't above being kind of silly or even cheesy, like throwing in synths and having just weird moments and kind of different song structures, and I really ended up liking them. So I just let the Christian stuff slide. Andrew WK is a cool guy, but if you want to go further than that, he's the guy who dresses like a painter and he sings mainly songs about partying, and they all sound alike, but it's okay because he's just relentlessly positive and fun. I respect him for it because he's done all this through a time where a lot of people were trying to be dark and broody, and he's just always like straight ahead party music. So there's something to be said for being positive and being a nice person. Also, I think he's somehow related to this guy. Weird, right? With Yellowcard, I just wonder how they ended up with a violinist in the band. It must have been by accident. Like, if you're trying to make your band cooler, you don't add a violin player. That's the opposite of cool. You know what will make this a really good band gimmick? We'll get the guy that we used to make fun of in high school orchestra, and we'll put him on that track about a street name. It's gonna be a hit. I think honestly he was just probably like a nice guy, and he's like, can I be in the band please? And they're like, fine. Newfound Glory was one of the pop punk bands to come out of the 2000s pop punk boom. They cemented a lot of the tropes like loving your friends and the really high, almost painfully nasal vocals. They could be considered the fathers of easycore, meaning pop punk with breakdowns. So if they're the fathers, then like I guess their kids are like 4 Year Strong, Set Your Goals, A Day to Remember. Neck Deep and Chunk, No Captain Chunk are the European cousins. And then their grandkids would be like Meet Me at the Altar, Trash Boat. I don't know, I'm not a genius. 4 Year Strong was really good at the genre of easycore, which everyone knows is pop punk with breakdowns. If you don't know what breakdowns are, it's when the music feels fast, then it starts to feel slow. Breakdown. They had 2 singers. They made these 2 albums, which were pretty much untouchable. Then they fired their keyboard guy, and they made this alt-rock album. You might be able to get away with nowadays, but back then, it really turned a lot of people off, I think, and stopped some of their momentum. And that's a shame because They still make good music, and the album wasn't that bad. But if you go from being this really cool punk band to all of a sudden sounding like Dollar Store Foo Fighters, it's gonna throw some people.
A Day to Remember got really big playing easycore, which is pop punk with breakdowns. They got a lot of mileage out of the pop punk tropes of loving your friends and hating your hometown. They kind of got to a point where they were beating a dead horse with the hometown stuff. But then their hometown gave them the keys to the city. If your hometown loves you, doesn't that kind of undermine you as a pop punk adjacent band? And it made their city seem kind of thirsty. They've been negging you for years, Ocala. Have some respect for yourself.
Alexis on Fire. Canadian, awesome. And no one does the like post-hardcore thing quite as well as them. Great screamer, and then their clean vocalist, Dallas Green, is probably one of the better ones in the genre. Me and my friends used to argue about it. Like, I thought it was Alexis on Fire. They thought it was Alex is on Fire. And Alexis on Fire sounds more sinister. Alex is on Fire looks like you're just pointing something out. Like, hey, look at Alex. Under Oath is a rock band from Florida. They released their Only Chasing Safety during peak Screamo, and it was kind of the perfect Screamo album. They could have kept going that way, and what a lot of bands were doing was getting more poppy and more radio friendly. But instead, they got even heavier and more technical. That's an admirable thing to do, and I think critically, people enjoyed that more. The whole radio rock thing would happen later, but that's another story. There was always this specter hanging over them of like, are they a Christian band? Are they not? Because everybody knows it's not cool to like Christian music. Like, it'd be cooler to like Dave Matthews Band. I always thought of Avenged Sevenfold as music by jocks for jocks. You can't convince me that if you're hanging out with these guys, they wouldn't be talking about gains and subs. To their credit, they were always ahead of the times or behind the times, depending on how you looked at it. When everybody was trying to be everyman post-hardcore guys, they decided to be Guns N' Roses, and it worked for them. I don't know if Sinister Gates embodies the aesthetic of Schecter Guitars or if Schecter Guitars embodies the aesthetic of Sinister Gates, but either way, it's a perfect union. Brand New is a band that started out as a pop punk band, then had an emo phase, then evolved into a really interesting rock band. Only I can't listen to him anymore because the singer has allegations, and he admitted to some of them. I have a real hard time separating the art from the artist. It's a huge bummer. Don't you think I want to come home after a hard day at work and throw on the quiet things that no one ever knows? But I can't. I really loved Brand New. Like in 90% of my college pictures, I'm wearing a Brand New t-shirt. Part of that's because I was poor, but the other part is I really love Brand New. Silverstein is a Canadian Screamo band from the early 2000s. They checked all the boxes. Screaming, singing, songs about girlfriends who cheated, so they fantasize about murdering them. Good hair. And they're still around to this day with most of the same members. You can't say that about a lot of 2000 Screamo bands. I chalk it up to first, musicianship. Paul Kohler is a majorly underrated drummer. And second, Canada. I feel like they're just nice Canadian dudes who eat poutine and root for the Leafs. Also, Shane Told's podcast got me into manscaping. With Seosin, they made their first EP with this guy, and it kind of sent out shockwaves through the scene. And then he left, and then this guy was left to fill his shoes. He did an admirable job, and they made 2 albums that were pretty good, but I don't think people ever forgave him for not being this guy, which is unfair. Anthony Green got back into Seosin, and they made more music, and it's pretty good. I think it'll be hard to ever recreate the feeling of that EP. Back then, when you first heard it, you were young. You used to think everything is possible, and now you know only a handful of things are possible. Too many things have happened. I'm going to give you 4 reasons to listen to Billy Talent. First, great songs. Second, Canada. Third, this guy's guitar parts. Also his hair, mostly his guitar parts. Number 4, this guy's voice. It can be a barrier to entry for some people. Just give it a try. Let it wash over you. Start with Billy Talent 2, and then pretty soon you'll just be craving it, like, oh, I want to hear that voice some more. It's really unique, and it's part of the overall appeal of this band is their uniqueness. Bring Me the Horizon started out as a deathcore band in the United Kingdom, and they've kind of evolved album by album, getting more melodic and more experimental. Some of their stuff now is really kind of poppy, and they collaborate with a lot of popular artists. Sometimes that alienates people, but they've been able to keep a lot of fans as far as I can tell. I think some of that can be attributed to the inexplicable appeal of wispy British guys, and you're probably saying you're just jealous, and yeah, why wouldn't I be? If you're a wispy British guy, the world is your oyster. The Used are a rock band that got big in the 2000s from Orem, Utah, which, who even knew that was a place before the Used? Supposedly they got big off of throwing a CD on stage when Goldfinger played, and John Feldman picked it up and signed them. How very 2000s, like that's wild. If he did something like that nowadays, people would be like, is that guy like a time traveler? Why has he got CDs? I remember when they were recording one of their later albums, Burt McCracken said they were trying to make an album that was gross pop. And I was like, yes, gross pop is my favorite genre of music. I had always been hesitant to get into the Dillinger Escape Plan because I had heard them described as mathcore, and from middle school to the present day, math is my worst subject. But then I started hearing about their crazy stage presence, so I went and saw them live, and they were out of control. The guitarists were all over the place, the singer was like bleeding from his head, like he's like Ric Flair. They were playing the hardest chords, and I was like, alright, I like this. I didn't even need to know any math. I was all worried for nothing. Thrash is a band that got really big in the 2000s Screamo boom. Dustin Kensrue is one of the most thoughtful, well-read people. They generally seem like nice guys. The same 4 members for the whole time. No one has more artistic integrity than Thrash. But they are so serious, and their fans take it so serious. I don't necessarily buy into the Thrash dogma that like everything Thrash does is perfect. It's not. It's mostly good. I enjoy it. Has everything they've ever done always been interesting to me? No. What I will say is their music since reuniting has been really good as their stuff before breaking up. You can't say that for a lot of bands. From First to Last was a chaotic band. Their music was chaotic. They were always losing members. Wes Borland was a member of their band for a time. During their peak, their singer was Sonny Moore, who was the original Short King, just a tiny ball of charisma, was lightning in a bottle. They made 2 really good albums. They kept making music after he left. They even had the guy from Periphery singing for a time. And people were still just like, meh. It just shows that people can get married to a certain lineup of a band. They got signed to Epitaph, which I think raised some eyebrows at the time because they weren't just like strictly punk rock. I think that just shows that Epitaph was always kind of looking to the future. Basically, From First to Last at that time was what Lil Lotus is now. Converge is a band from Massachusetts. I didn't listen to a lot of heavy music, so when I first heard Jane Doe as a young person, and I heard those first few notes of Concubine, I was like, I'm scared. And everything comes in, and I felt like I was being ranked into a gang, like there was just a bunch of people around me, punching and kicking me, in the best possible way. When I heard the vocals, I was like, are you serious with those vocals? Other bands' vocalists are doing like fry screams, and they drink tea and take care of themselves. Jacob Bannon is literally shredding his vocal cords on every song. If you go see a Converge show and you're in the front row, you're literally getting pieces of his vocal cords, like little shreds of his vocal cords on you, and I hope you appreciate it. To my mind, AFI has had 3 eras. There's the nondescript punk band era, then there's the theater kid spooky season era, and then there's the current aloof rock band era. My favorite era was the goth pop Every Day is Halloween era. The songs are just so well written. Everything about the band was over the top. The lyrics were so overwrought and self-serious and glorious. The current era is fine. I like it. It's just not as fun. I could talk about AFI for hours. Enter Shikari is a rock band from the United Kingdom that's always evolving, but they're notable for their use of electronic elements. Now I love Enter Shikari and I've seen them live a bunch of times. Somewhere between Take to the Skies and Common Dreads, Rao took like a political science class and a lot of the lyrics became super political after that. Which I don't mind, but sometimes their lyrics can be a bit on the nose or heavy-handed.
It's an outrage. It's a tragedy.
He really thinks he's blowing your mind. Sometimes I miss the inhale scream. So, Falling in Reverse is a band, and they're really good, and their fans are really good, and the singer Ronnie Radke, he's a good guy, and his cowboy hat is good, and his Bird is good, and I don't want any problems. Kings of Leon came at this point in the mid-2000s where a lot of the bands sounded alike and nobody seemed very good at playing guitar, and it was like, is this a choice? Or these guys should have paid for a lesson a few times and didn't. What stood out about Kings of Leon is Caleb's voice, like it's very raspy. I could never understand what he was saying. I would put this album on and be like, I don't know what he's saying at all. And then they released this album and it blew up and everybody knew them. And it seemed like some of the people who originally liked them kind of jumped ship. They released this album and it seemed like time had moved on by then. But we had some good times. Future Islands are a band with Andy Samberg from SNL. Do that one song, I Threw It on the Ground. Future Islands are a synth-pop band from North Carolina. The first time I saw them, they had this viral YouTube video when they were on Letterman. And the first thought I had was like, somebody's dad is vibing hard. Good for him. And then he was growling, and I read that I guess as he gets older he realizes he can't hit high notes, so he just growls instead.
which is, you do you, man. It's not necessarily my thing. People like Pitchfork love it, but that tells me all I really need to know.
The Killers are one of the last great rock and roll bands. Their debut album was amazing. Like when I hear those first, like the radio noise and the helicopter noise of Jenny Was a Friend of Mine on this album, I'm getting excited. I'm getting pumped up because I know I'm going to be hearing this boom, banger, wall-to-wall bangers on this album. Samson is really great. When You Were Young is probably one of the best songs ever. Day and Age is great. No complaints here. From here on out, it's just the train is bound for Springsteen Town, for better or for worse. And I just want to say that respectfully, these last few albums were kind of boring, just my opinion, but these old ear holes need something a little more upbeat. But I think we can all agree that Brandon Flowers is a beautiful man. Phoebe Bridgers is a singer-songwriter who writes great songs. She has really clever lyrics, really beautiful melodies. I would classify her as indie. If you want to get more specific, I would classify her as sad white girl music, just a scientific term. While her songs are really good, if you listen to a whole album, you run the risk of getting either sad or sleepy. And that's not a dig, again, just science. What I like to do is I create a playlist, so like the first 3 songs of an album, and then something more upbeat. So like DVD Menu, Garden Song, Kyoto, then Bodies by Drowning Pool, Punisher, Halloween, Chinese Satellite, Crawling in the Dark by Hoobastank. It's a pretty good system. Feel free to adopt it. Sabaton is a power metal band from Sweden, where power metal will sometimes talk about battles and wars and stuff. Sabaton took it a step further and they're singing about actual historical battles. It's almost like they said, how can we make power metal nerdier? And they did it. They have a part on their website which shows which songs are about which historical battles. So funny. It's good because what I like about power metal is it's a genre that doesn't take itself too seriously. And writing lyrics is hard. Like, I can just imagine they're struggling with the song and like, man, I don't know what to write about. And they just bang open a history book and like, there's a whole album. I think it's cool that a new generation of people are getting into pop punk. I think it's fine that it comes through Machine Gun. Yeah, I'm cool with Machine Gun. I think it's cool that he works with Travis Barker, you know, and that's some form of legitimacy. All jokes aside, I think Machine Gun Kelly is fine. We all had gateway artists that got us into certain genres of music, and then once we were in, we proceeded to look deeper and find, you know, different, other, better artists. I think it's cool if Machine Gun Kelly is that for a new generation of people. And like I say, his music is fine, but it's not necessarily my cup of tea. But then again, I'm old, and that's how it's supposed to work. Powerwolf is a metal band from Germany, and they kind of confused me initially because some of their lyrics sound like Christian metal, but they look like this, and their artwork looks like this, which is bananas in the best possible way, but it just is confusing. I've read and they talk about how like metal is kind of their religion, is kind of some of what they sing about, so they sing about religious themes mixed in with Halloween, werewolves. They seem like they're having a really fun time with playing heavy music, which is how it should be, really. Womb Ripper is a fairly obscure Russian death metal band. They sound pretty good to me. I really like their name. It's in the tradition of all the old school like death metal bands like Cannibal Corpse, Dying Fetus, Aborted, Cattle Decapitation, Necrophagus, Cryptopsy, Deicide, Carcass, Dismembered, Decapitated, Carnage, etc. Zavlik took this whole naming convention to its logical conclusion, and I feel like some bands don't even have that good of names anymore. Some of them just sound like medical. Miasmatic Necrosis. What am I, a MD? Sebum Excess Production, Enuresis, that's just peeing the bed. Gingivitis, Hypermesis, Hyperdontia, Putrescine Inhalation, Dehumanizing Encephalectomy. That one's actually pretty cool. But some bands are still, you know, trying really hard and have good names. Antichrist Siege Machine, Brutal Sphincter, and Casket Mush. Those are my top 3 current band names. Casket Mush has the best song titles. Blood Incantation is a death metal band from Denver that has managed to do what a lot of death metal bands can't do, which is to be interesting and even innovative. I love their imagery. I love that all their lyrics are about space and aliens and have a little bit of Lovecraft. Sometimes their music sounds like space. They have an absolutely unintelligible logo. What is not to like? They released 2 solid death metal albums and then they released like a synth album. I respect their ambition. Quick, I want to talk about Infant Annihilator. They're a deathcore band, kind of a meme band from the United Kingdom. First singer was from Indiana, of all places. Turns out there's a lot of cool people from Indiana.
They have the perfect death metal name. I think they predate Zavleg by a few years. Sometimes I see them and I'm like, these guys aren't taking it seriously. But then I listen to the music, I'm like, they're taking it deathly seriously. They have the goblin vocals. The double bass is insane. Song titles are part Cannibal Corpse, part Roald Dahl. What's not to love about that?
I always thought of Cannibal Corpse as the quintessential death metal band. Like they had the blast beats and the guitars and the low gutturals. And it seemed like their mission statement was, what is the most horrifying thing we can say? And can we get artwork to match? How upset can we get these parents? Which is hilarious because you see interviews with them and they seem like chill dudes, especially George. He seems like such a nice guy. And also he and I have the same neck. Insane Clown Posse, you've been a band about 30 years, so we're going to be giving you your performance review. First field is music, and I'm going to rate that as needs improvement. Some people would call it unlistenable. I just say that it appeals to a very narrow group of people, but those people, it really appeals to them. The next field is inclusivity. We'll rate that as exceeds expectations, because you really will just take anybody. The third field is profitability. We're going to rate that as exceeds expectations as well, because you've done a real good job at monetizing community. There's a hatchet man you can put on and sell anything. We really appreciate that. Good job overall, guys. Keep up the good work.
Dead Kennedys are one of the bands that you're supposed to like. Are they important? Yes. Are they fun to listen to? Not really. After listening to their discography for educational purposes, do I listen to them on the regular after that? No. Like never in the history of ever has it been like a nice summer day and you're with your friends and you're going to Sonic to get an ocean water and somebody's like, hey, throw on Dead Kennedys. And that's just me expressing my personal opinion, which shouldn't bother anyone. And if it does bother someone, I would say to look within and ask, am I the type of person who takes themselves way too seriously?
Guns N' Roses are a cautionary tale about not believing your own hype. They came out of the gate with Appetite for Destruction, and it became one of the best debuts ever. It had perfected all the staples of the era. Ludicrous lyrics, shreddy guitar, and ridiculous high vocals. Like, who knew the human voice could sound like that? And did it really need to? Then they do a couple more albums that are bloated and overrated. Then Axl Rose spent the next 20 years burning off every ounce of goodwill and becoming a parody of himself. And then releases Chinese Democracy, which was trash, with people who weren't even really Guns N' Roses. I get that if you start out so successful, it might be hard to not get a big head, but man, don't be this guy. I love Canada, so it brings me great pleasure to talk about Rush, the great Canadian prog band. If you don't know what prog is, just know there's really long songs, oftentimes with science fiction or fantasy lyrical content. Rush fans are not nearly as aggressive as some other musical fandoms. They have a deep, abiding love of Rush, but they won't force it on you. I've never met a casual Rush fan, know all the albums and all the stuff, and have a very small shrine to Geddy Lee's Soul Patch. I feel like Rush fans are also the type of people who like really elaborate tabletop games with lots of instructions. If someone is a Rush fan, they will also wreck you at Settlers of Catan. Did you know that before he was king of Halloween Town, Jack Skellington fronted a new wave band called Oingo Boingo? But seriously, Oingo Boingo sounds like it could have been the band that Jack Skellington was in college while he was finishing his political science degree before he assumed the Halloween throne. It touches on so many Halloween type themes. Danny Elfman goes on to score all the best movies, and he works with the guitarist from Oingo Boingo still. Sometimes Oingo Boingo reunites, and sometimes Danny Elfman just plays with a guy from Limp Bizkit. Oingo Boingo contains multitudes. The Police are to reggae and ska what Eminem is to hip-hop, what Eric Clapton is to the blues, what Justin Timberlake is to R&B and soul. But with that being said, I really love the Police. I've loved them since I was a kid. They combine kind of new wave and punk and obviously ska and reggae. I love those upbeats, man. Upbeats. Sting is like the smug oldest child. Stuart Copeland is the brash, attention-seeking youngest child. Andy Summers is the mellow, compliant middle child. And something about that chemistry made the best music. Everything Sting has released since then has just been vanilla paste, boring. Typo Negative was a goth metal band to have a dark take on romance and relationships. I will speculate and say that part of what made Typo Negative special is the appeal of singer Peter Steele. He was a tall, broody, vampire-looking guy. Peter Steele was like if Edward Cullen was actually dangerous. He's your vampire boyfriend. Edward Cullen was just sparkly and pouty, and he would never really drink your blood. With Peter Steele, he just might drink your blood in a romantic way. I know he predates Edward Cullen. I'm just saying he fit the hot vampire boyfriend trope. The Ramones are one of the few legacy bands that I could sincerely get into. There's a lot of bands that you're supposed to like. The Ramones, I probably like the best. I could draw a straight line from them to the music that I liked. Melodies, buzzsaw guitars, and for their time, fast tempos. I like that they couldn't really play their instruments well, or not even that they couldn't play their instruments well, that they didn't play them in a super technical way. Like, it made me think that I could play music. And what's also funny is they were what punk looked like until the Sex Pistols. So if the Sex Pistols hadn't come along, punk would look like them. The Smiths are just a guy feeling sorry for himself, like lyrically, but then you put it all together with Johnny Marr's guitars and it all works really well. The Smiths were a band that were greater than the sum of its parts. Solo Morrissey was never as good. The Police were kind of the same way. Once Sting went solo, it was never as good. I think something about having other members kind of balanced out those strong, egotistical personalities. That's what got a really good result. Either way, for the brief time we had them, the Smiths were amazing. I think the Beatles are accurately rated. I think they're important to music history. I don't think they're necessarily the best band, but I think they're one of the best bands. Personally, I think the best band, that goes to the Spin Doctors, but that's a different conversation. What's important about the Beatles is they kind of set the blueprint. They started off with kind of lightweight pop stuff, and then they evolved and did all kinds of different things, got more experimental, did the concept album-ish. They just tried different things, and then they eventually broke up based on kind of ego and internal squabbles. But you know who never broke up? And if you want to call me baby, just go ahead. Ozzy Osbourne is important to music history, and he has a unique voice, but he's not the strongest writer as far as melody goes. Like on those first few Black Sabbath albums, he basically just sings in unison with the guitar riff. You always have to pair him with somebody to get good results. Like without Tony Iommi, there wouldn't have been Black Sabbath. Ozzy couldn't have done it by himself. Also, would Ozzy's career have kept on going without Randy Rhoads or without Zakk Wylde? Also, his stage presence is funny to me. Like, he just has always looked very geriatric, even when he was young. The Cure is another band that will always be tied to the lead singer's hair. I had always heard that The Cure were depressing. When I think of all their big hits, those are all pretty upbeat. Like He's in Love and It's Friday, that rules. But I guess as I listen to more of the album tracks, like, yeah, I can hear it. Like, sometimes I'm like, Robert Smith needs counseling. And then I listen to some of the other ones, I'm like, bah, he's fine. Lynyrd Skynyrd is a band in the genre of southern rock. They're pretty cool. Freebird rips. That's why people asked for it. That's why it became a joke. They also have some morbid lore about this album came out and whoever the flames touch died in a plane crash. Rock stars and planes were a very bad combination. My favorite part of the Lynyrd Skynyrd story is how they had an old-timey beef with Neil Young. He released a track called Southern Man, basically dissing all of the South. Had to take forever. They had to hear Neil Young's song, go in a studio, record their song to tape, finish their album, send it out to like a vinyl pressing plant, have it packaged and shipped to stores on the specified release date. That was it. That must have been the slowest beef ever. Alice Cooper is a band and later a solo artist who perfected this thing I like to call Alice Cooper's Law. It states parents afraid equals Alice gets paid. Teens and kids want to rebel, and you make music that's like a certain amount of rebellious, they'll eat it up. So Cooper did this with makeup, lyrics, a crazy stage show. Why is this album called Muscle of Love? I don't like that very much. And lots of other artists have used this equation to make themselves millionaires. I like Motorhead's music. I like that they're a trio, that they're from the United Kingdom, the bass player sings, they're hugely influential on a bunch of bands. I like Lemmy's voice, it's very distinct. He seems like a legit old rock and roll dude. Like whatever he's singing, he's living it. Like he's not out there shopping at Armani. I feel like with Jethro Tull, it's like when they decided to put pineapple on pizza. Some people are going to really like it, some people might not. And then people try it and like, whoa, that's kind of, who knew? And then it's the same thing with Jethro Tull and the flute. Like we're going to put flute in rock music. You're going to love it. And for the most part, I do love it. Although I know there's some people who probably don't care for it, and that's okay. They have some sick riffs. And then Too Old to Rock and Roll and Too Young to Die is kind of the slogan of my life. Iron Maiden are a British heavy metal band that got really big in the 80s. Their music and their imagery have been hugely influential. Most people probably know them from Eddie, their zombie whatever mascot, the bass that goes duk 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 duk, and then the Trooper. So the song is like me 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 me. That riff is so sick. If I had written that 2-guitar harmony, I would have retired after that and just cashed Trooper checks. They kept working. They're still making music. With Iron Maiden, I feel like a lot of people know who Steve Harris is, and how many other bands have a recognizable bass player. This is one of many bands who is like, our talent is here, but to be professionals, we need to be here. So to fill in this gap, let's fill it with spectacle. Like we have like jumpsuits and makeup. You have, you know, blood and you have too much chest hair exposed, and you're a cat. And I appreciate it because they're trying to be entertainers and they're not taking themselves too seriously, which I think is a virtue in music.